We have Jamie Stern-Weiner. Are you with us, Jamie? He's done a lot of work on the question of the IHRA misdefinition of anti-Semitism. So we're very pleased to have you with us. Welcome.
Thanks, Tina. Okay, so I want to use my 10 minutes here to just help clarify what I think are the principles at stake in the fight over the IHRA working definition. The definition's supporters say it's just a tool to help with consistent data collection, or it's just a symbolic commitment, that it poses no danger to free speech, and that it has nothing whatsoever to do with defending Israel from legitimate criticism. It must just be a coincidence then that debate over the IHRA definition in multiple countries has consistently pit supporters of Israel on the one side against progressive Jewish groups, Palestine solidarity activists, and civil liberties campaigners on the other. It must all just be a giant misunderstanding. Well, to dispel this confusion and mystification, help clear the way for a debate about the principles that truly are at stake, I want to make 3 points about the definition's genesis and applications to date. First, the definition is a pro-Israel initiative. It was drafted and negotiated in 2004 by a handful of mainly pro-Israel groups led by the American Jewish Committee. Its adoption by the IHRA in 2016 was engineered by the Simon Wiesenthal Center. Let's just focus on the Simon Wiesenthal Center for now. So this is an organization which engages in blanket pro-Israel advocacy of the crudest kind, in the course of which it routinely conflates legitimate, accurate criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism. So just to give a flavor, it described EU guidelines which prohibit funding institutions located in Israel's illegal settlements as, quote, redolent of the 1930s Nazi boycott of the Jews throughout the Reich, which was the prelude to the Holocaust. And just recently, when the pre-trial chamber of the International Criminal Court ruled that it had jurisdiction in Palestine, the Simon Wiesenthal Center accused it of, quote, anti-Semitism and of trying to, quote, punish Jews for defending themselves from those committed to finish Hitler's genocidal goals. So the working definition, it's a vehicle for investing such designations with political, regulatory, and ultimately legal authority. Second point, there are actually two IHRA working definitions. The first refers to a two-sentence passage. I'm sure you're all familiar with it, but I'll just quote it for those who aren't. Anti-Semitism is a certain perception of Jews which may be expressed as hatred toward Jews. Rhetorical and physical manifestations of anti-Semitism are directed toward Jewish or non-Jewish individuals and or their property, toward Jewish community institutions and religious facilities. Let's call this, for our purposes, the meaningless definition. The second IHRA working definition comprises a list of 11 examples of purported anti-Semitic statements, of which 7 make reference to Israel. These include such criteria as denying the Jewish people their right to self-determination and applying double standards to it. Let's call this list of examples Israel's definition. What's important to bear in mind is that Israel's advocates and the leading advocates of the working definition, they couldn't care less about the meaningless definition. After all, it's meaningless. Supporters of the IHRA working definition have themselves dismissed that two-sentence passage as very generalist and vague, that's the campaign against anti-Semitism, or even totally muted and unmoored from any current reality, that's the Simon Wiesenthal Center. Meanwhile, Israeli officials say that, quote, what turns the IHRA definition into an essential definition in our eyes is the list of examples. That's why they won't drop the most obviously political and indefensible examples, double standards, self-determination. Rightly or wrongly, in my view wrongly, dropping those would at one stroke neutralize most of the public criticism of the working definition. It would also plainly serve the claimed purpose of that definition, namely to provide a clear and consistent standard for data collectors. But they won't drop them. Why not? Because those are the examples that can be most easily used against Israel's critics. It might be wondered, why did the IHRA itself adopt Israel's definition, even as it manifestly threatens the free speech of critics of Israel? Well, the interesting answer is it didn't. The IHRA's decision-making body, in fact, excluded the 11 examples from its working definition, which comprised the meaningless definition only. This fact has subsequently been misrepresented by Israel's advocates, certain UK officials, and regrettably by elements of the IHRA itself. but it's easily documented and it soon will be. Third point, in practice, pro-Israel campaigners have used the definition to chill speech. So it's repeatedly claimed that the definition is not intended as a tool for censorship, but its champions have also repeatedly insisted that it be used as such. Most obviously, it was demanded that Labour incorporate Israel's definition into its code of conduct. There's an ongoing international campaign pressing social media platforms to use it to censor posts, and the UK government, backed by mainstream Jewish organisations, is seeking to impose it on universities. What's more, in practice, it has been repeatedly used, not just to stigmatise, but also to stifle speech. We just heard a few examples from university campuses. Consider now the Labour Party. In summer 2018, pro-Israel groups demanded that Labour adopt the IHRA working definition and all the IHRA's examples verbatim, which is to say, in our terms, Israel's definition. Labour's attempt to only adopt most of those examples, rejecting or adapting others, was condemned as proof positive that it had an anti-Semitism problem. Everyone from the Board of Deputies to the Community Security Trust to government ministers insisted that, to use the words of a joint statement by 7 UK delegates to the IHRA, quote, any modified version of the IHRA definition that does not include all of its 11 examples is no longer the IHRA definition. Now, this was flatly false, as noted, but it worked as Labour's ruling body capitulated and adopted Israel's definition. So how's it being used? Consider one recent case. In a historic development, Israel's leading human rights organization, B'Tselem, recently found that Israel oversees a regime of Jewish supremacy from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea that amounts to apartheid. A Labour member recently submitted a motion to their branch supporting B'Tselem's position and calling for an end to the apartheid regime. But the chair said that it should not be put on the agenda, it was out of order, because the references to apartheid can be read as characterizing Israel as a racist endeavor, and this is contrary to the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism. The chair's position was supported by regional officers. In other words, we've now reached the juncture where supporting Israel's leading human rights organization is prohibited and suppressed within the Labour Party as anti-Semitic. The crucial point is not just that Israel's definition facilitates such outrages, but that its most consequential supporters either do not object to or actively encourage this assault on free speech. When one British university cancelled a student event planned as part of Israel Apartheid Week, the Simon Wiesenthal Center, recall the architect of the IHRA definition, praised the move and urged other universities to follow suit. The Simon Wiesenthal Center has openly boasted about the definition's contribution to, quote, legislation condemning anti-Zionism and BDS, and recalled with satisfaction how, quote, in the United Kingdom, the IHRA definition helped to clearly expose Jeremy Corbyn and Labour's patterns of anti-Semitism and provoked a controversy that contributed to Corbyn's landslide defeat. A controversy that, to repeat, was based on a falsehood, one that was propagated most authoritatively by the pro-Israel supporters of the IHRA definition. To conclude then, we can and should confidently set aside the mystification around what the definition's purpose and practical effect is. It was drafted by pro-Israel groups as a vehicle through which to stigmatize and stifle criticism of Israel. All supporters of free speech should oppose it, not just in terms of Palestine, but as a matter of principle in those terms. Thanks.